All right, now we're going to talk about social learning, which is the third that we are talking about now. So this one is different than what we've looked at so far because it's looking at things within our minds that are going on as well as what we can see from people's behaviors. So to understand criminal behavior, we must examine perceptions, thoughts, expectancies, competencies, and values. So it's not just what's going on with behavior, but also how we are interpreting and analyzing and thinking about the behaviors. So again, with social learning theory, we are adding in that cognitive processes element that we did not have with behaviorism. So let's look at this a little bit more with particular thought into expectancies. So expectancy theory is that your level of effort or performance is based on your expectations of the consequences. Again, remember that consequences could be good or bad, but how hard you try is going to depend on what you expect. So an example would be, I will try hard because I expect that I'll get a cookie. So from the times that I've done this before, I've gotten a cookie, so this time I'm going to try hard again because I want that cookie. Perhaps I tried before, but not very hard, and I didn't get a cookie, and so I know I need to try hard to get the cookie. Another example that I usually give in class is if I told you to, right at this moment, take out a piece of paper and write me an essay on classical conditioning, what would you do? Would you have any questions for me? Like, is this a quiz or a test? Or what are the points associated? If you know there's nothing associated with in-class writing assignments, you might not be too quick to write out anything. So you're not going to try hard or maybe do it at all because you expect that I'm not really going to be able to do anything to you negatively, right? So it's another way to think about it. All right, moving on to observational learning. Individuals learn as a result of watching others, which we would call models. We learn from watching our parents, siblings, friends, and we imitate their behavior. So we've got a young boy walking down the street, imitating the men. Girls putting on makeup like they've likely seen their mothers do. Doing similar types of things in the bathroom, wanting your hair to be done just like your mom's. Shaving just like your dad. Sitting the same. Looks like maybe a flight based on the seats. And wanting to have a phone of your own just so you could act like your dad. All examples of observing the model. So in the case where the parents are right there, observing the model and then imitating that same behavior. This theory stemmed from the work of Albert Bandura, and he stated that we model, imitate, and mimic the behavior that we observe. So people in our environment, we see them, we might imitate and then mimic that behavior. And again, we learn by observing others. So if we're applying this to antisocial behavior, the same thing can be said from observing your parents getting ready, getting dressed, etc. If we observe aggressive, criminal, and antisocial behavior, we will often model that behavior as well. So here's an example from Big Daddy. He sees Adam Sandler peeing outside, and so he wants to do the same thing. Children model the behavior that they observe. So if your parents are modeling that behavior, or people in your life, the child is learning those behaviors from watching you do them. So where does antisocial and criminal behavior come from? One theory is that it comes from watching others, observing others, and then mimicking others. Here now we'll talk about the Bobo doll experiment. This experiment was done to see the degree to which children would mimic the behavior of adults, behaviors that they've never seen before and don't necessarily aren't instructed to do so. I'll talk about more about this in a moment. Not surprisingly, the results that we have is that the children copied the behavior they had observed the adults engaging in. Forgot. So we are going to get more in depth on this in Chapter 5. This is just a very brief glimpse, and much more on Chapter 5 with this experiment. But in a basic sense, we've got a woman that was shown to children to be beating up on this Bobo doll they hadn't seen before and hadn't interacted with before. And if she was behaving aggressively towards it, children were more likely to behave aggressively towards it. But there's a little bit more to it that we'll talk about in Chapter 5. Go ahead and watch this video up to 3 minutes and 11 seconds. And so pause it and continue when you're done. All right, so role models can be a whole lot of different people. When we are very young children, we often will imitate our parents, but this changes once we get into adolescence, where we're more likely to want to imitate friends and peers, and also celebrities. The best role models for us, or those that we believe to be role models, are those that are most similar to us in whatever capacity that might be. And of course, we don't model all of this behavior of all people the same. So you might tend to mimic the behavior of your mother more than your father if you're a girl. But if you're a boy, you might tend to identify with your father and model with your father more than your mother. Not all of your peers will you be interested in doing the things that they do, and certainly not all celebrities as well, just to give us some examples. We also learn by observing the good and bad things that happen to other people. So we don't necessarily need to get those consequences on our own. So if we're seeing a child sleeping versus a child that has done the reading and answers the question, the teacher gives positive reinforcement for reading, we learn that the teacher wants us to read and to participate in class. We can also observe punishment and learn how that could affect us by what is done to others. So as an example here, the change in both appearance and demeanor from taking drugs, and then we could perhaps view the negative consequences and then perhaps avoid that. All right, so From our social learning theory, basically we are not aggressive in ourselves, not to a large degree. But we are learning to behave this way from observing others, also considering what's rewarded and punished, and then deciding from that what kind of behaviors to do. Reinforcement helps maintain these behaviors as well. So criminal behaviors wouldn't necessarily continue if there were no reinforcements at all. But think back to all of the different rewards that people can get, from physical to psychological, emotional. It would be pretty difficult to stop all kinds of reinforcement for all criminal actions. All right, we'll stop here.